I
Not
feel
live
like
on Facebook.
I have the giant version and Colm has the mini version.
What have you got on
Okay,
there?
BCAAs. What do you have in
Yeah,
yours?
it's coffee,
Mm.
but yeah, it is morning for me. So
I was thinking to do a coffee actually, but I think James would have killed me if I did a coffee.
All right. We made it. Perfect. We are live for Lift Big, Eat Big show number 5. Again, for anyone listening, if you are part of the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, that will be in the description of this recording, where you can be in the private community, get access to all the training programs from everyone here, and you can join these live to ask any questions you want and ask any questions you want in the private community too. But today we have myself, we have Colm Wolfe, 2 times World's Strongest Man competitor, and we have Mona DeLacy, or Pretorius DeLacy if you want to search her and see all her accomplishments around the Commonwealth medal in weightlifting, CrossFit Games, athlete, African champion, and much, much more. But today we have a few topics. The first one we're going to cover is about training to failure. Should you? Shouldn't you? Is there a time to do it? And we're going to cover the recent World's Strongest Man results. Obviously, they just finished over the weekend. We're going to see if Colm's predictions were correct. And then we're going to also finish with the European Weightlifting Championships that I think Mona pretty much watched every single session there as well. So she's going to break that down for you and anything coming up in the future. But let's start with training to failure. Obviously, this probably isn't as applicable to Mona because she does Olympic weightlifting. You don't do snatches and clean and jerks to failure unless you're doing CrossFit. So I'm going to ask you, Colm, within the sport of strongman specifically, is there a time and place to train to failure within that? Is that something that you've done yourself or done with your clients?
So I would say you could make an argument there's a time and place for it. But so defining failure, I'm going to define it as, well, concentric failure. So once you can no longer lift up a certain weight, so I'm not really concerned with overloading the negative and that sort of thing for the time being. For the most part, I would say it's not necessary. So especially in the context of strongman, the goal is to get stronger overall and to improve your technique and get more efficient at your event training. Training to failure, and so strongman by its nature is using a lot of large muscle groups all at once. And to do those kind of exercises to failure has such a huge impact on recovery. I really don't think it's worth it. There are times that you could make an argument for certain things. So some of the strongman events, you might have, it might be on the lighter side, a squat for reps, a deadlift for reps, something like that, where you're potentially going to get towards 20 reps. In training, I could see it beneficial to do a set to failure where you're really pushing your limits. But the big thing you need to, that's a specific example leading up to a competition, and you need to cater your other training around it, because doing a heavy set of squats or deadlifts to failure is so fatiguing, it's likely going to ruin the rest of your training week. So you need to do it strategically. So prior to a deload is often an easy way to do it if you know you're going to be deloading the following week. But yeah, overall, personally, I think it costs more than it gives back. Sometimes I could see an argument, if you're doing your strongman events, you don't have much time, you work full time and whatnot. I think things like myo reps can be good. But even then, I don't actually like to use myo reps. So myo reps is basically, it's very similar to a rest pause set. So let's say, just for example, bicep curls, you do 10 reps. It can be to failure or slightly short of failure. You take a few deep breaths and then you continue the set. If I was to use, I consider it kind of a failure method, but even then, I would actually stop the initial set a rep short of failure, especially if you're doing other strongman stuff. And I would only do it on those smaller exercises. Even then, I don't necessarily think it's necessary. If you've got the time to spend in the gym, I think you might as well just do straight sets. But in that particular case, let's say you don't have much time, I can see an argument for myo reps on those smaller exercises, but definitely not for the big compounds. There's also some nice research that I'm a fan of that's come out. I think they both came out this year. A couple of papers from Martin Refalo, I think is how you say his name, but there was a meta-analysis where they compared a bunch of studies and comparing failure or keeping reps in the tank, and there wasn't any significant difference, as in you didn't really gain. They were looking at hypertrophy, but you didn't gain more muscle mass from training to failure compared to non-failure. So I think that, although, like, as usual, there's a lot of limitations to studies, right? The participants and whatnot. I still think it gives a good overview of what I've experienced. And then there's another paper he did this year comparing, so they had a failure group, 1 rep in the tank group, and 3 reps in the tank. And this was looking at neuromuscular fatigue and like perceptions of fatigue. And as you would expect, the people going to failure recovered slower, and 1 in the tank, if you go off that previous research, giving like similar results. It's kind of, to me, it's presenting an argument in the literature of why would you train to failure? It's not necessarily necessary. And then especially in the context of strength, like you mentioned with Mona, probably doesn't really need it. But my final answer for strongman is very niche situations would you actually go to failure. So if you've got on the actual strongman events, I would only go to failure likely prior to deload if you have a specific repetition event coming up, or potentially with some of the smaller, if you're after some hypertrophy, you don't have the most time, and you've got those smaller exercises towards the end of the workout. So like, it's not going to be a big deal if you do a set of failure on dumbbell lateral raises, but if you're doing a set to failure on like a log press, it's going to have that's going to be just too fatiguing. It's going to take away from your next day and likely the whole week.
Yeah.
And Colm,
No,
I have a
exactly.
question for you quickly because sorry, James, but like you said, my definition of training to failure is very similar to your definition to training to failure for strongman, where obviously with working with 1 rep maxes and wanting to be as strong as possible with the best technique possible. But now my question is, it's a 2-part question. Now my first part question is, so like in weightlifting, we have, for example, the Bulgarian training cycle, which I think you might be aware of. And for those that's not aware of it, it's basically training like 1 rep maxes. I think it's every single day you'll do 1 rep maxes. And obviously, in my mind, that is for weightlifting training to failure. And in weightlifting, like people who can do that kind of training cycles, normally they have, they'll say the only way that you can do something like a Bulgarian training cycle is honestly if you are on something, if you're on steroids or anabolic things or whatever, then only, because obviously what will happen is your body will end up breaking down, you'll end up getting injured, and it will just mess with a lot of things. I think it will mess with your hormones, etc. So my question is, do you guys have specific training cycles where, for example, you do train to failure that are known to how strongman train? And then my second question is, for example, is do you guys then, because obviously what you were mentioning, lifting as much as you can with the best possible technique, do you guys work with RPEs, or do you work with percentages? So do you have a 1 rep max and you will then take a percentage of that 1 rep max? Or do you just say, okay, for your training today, you will just, if it's something heavy, go up until like an RPE 8 or 9 or something where you have like 1 or 2 reps left in the tank?
So for the first question, like if there's something similar to the Bulgarian method, I would say no, we don't have anything like that. I just think if you tried to do that in strongman, because of the nature of the exercises, you'll just get hurt so fast. Like trying to, especially when you bring into carries. So if you think about like how stressful just regular lifting is, and then if you imagine like say yoke or farmer's walk, you're lifting up a really heavy object and you're trying to move as fast as you can with it. So that's your whole body weight moving quick. Like the amount of force going through your joints, like is obviously higher even if you're just sprinting no weight, and then combined with the actual additional weight has such a huge effect on the body. So I've never seen someone try just max out every time. I would say earlier on in my career, and like how it used to be, people did max out all the events like once a week. So they would then, like no one really does this anymore, but you would do your regular gym training during the week, go train your events. And like when I started, we essentially on the weekend, we just maxed everything out. So it wasn't very smart, and I was pretty lucky to make it through unscathed, but a lot of other people didn't. But it was part of being seen as like hardcore and whatnot. And to the second question, I personally, like everyone has their different way of doing it, but I kind of use a combination of all of those. So like reps in reserve or RPE are probably my favorites. Most of the time these days, to be honest, I just look at the client's video, and then we'll make a call on what we're going to do for the next week. I just find, even kind of like we were talking about in the periodization episode, with having set percentages and with majority, I mean, all my clients work full time, I find that gets people to stick, they're too attached to sticking to this particular number instead of playing it by the day. So I like to see the video and then make a call, give them a suggestion, but always with that in the back of their mind. So I might give them, say, a number or a range and a reps in reserve number, depending on, like, I might call it, at the moment I've got reps in reserve, but shorter failure or RPE, they kind of all, pretty similar. So yeah, I kind of use a combination of all of those. And I do think that's a smart way to do it, because of the nature of strongman is so, you kind of have to be reactable like that. Like you don't necessarily know. A lot of the time as well, clients will go train at a different gym to try a specific piece of equipment. So let's say a log, right? They might be training on a 10-inch log. They'll drive to a different gym because in their next competition they have a 12-inch log. I can't exactly just say, okay, we're going to do 80% of your log when this log they've got is a 10-inch log. It doesn't really work that way. So it's better. I like to have that, reps in reserve number is just a little bit more applicable. And then I suppose the other issue, I'm sure happens a lot in weightlifting as well. But like, so when I'm talking about failure, I'm really talking about muscular failure, not necessarily like technical failure, as in, like, let's say someone's doing farmer's walk and they just they just misstepped or whatever and they suddenly drop the weights. That is just part of the sport as well. That's part of practicing your technique and getting better. And like we see that all the time in weightlifting as well, right?
No, definitely. When weightlifting, like you said, often it can be a technical error that can cause you to miss the lift. Where if a person, like you were saying now, if a person also does train to failure, like, again, there's a time and place for everything. So you will, for example, with things like your volume work, I explained to one of my athletes the other day, I said to him, you will have these really heavy sessions, and you will have these sessions where a weight will be a struggle. But when you coach athletes, because it's such a technical sport, and because you also want to make sure that it's not just ripping and gripping that weight and trying to get it up, like for example, in CrossFit, how it's just about getting the weight overhead. Where in weightlifting, if you obviously do things like that and you are not technically perfect on the competition floor, it will be a failed lift. But again, like doing volume work where it is a lot more strenuous, where you can almost say it is a kind of a training to failure, but it's more to the fact of, like, you just want the athlete to be able to work like time under tension to get them stronger at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's some I guess when you're talking about failure as well, you're also talking about training goals. So you guys are talking about strength sports in particular, where there's a big technical component. So typically it goes, if you're training athletic performance, you never go to failure. If you're training for strength, very rarely will you go to failure. And then if you're training to build muscle, sometimes you may go to failure. And then within those brackets or parameters, it's going to depend on the exercise, as Colin was talking about. If you're doing it on big compound lifts, it's not a good idea. There's some good research showing stopping 2 to 3 reps short of failure gives similar gains in muscle mass as training to failure with bigger compound lifts. Same thing with strength. So you can stay away from it when you're doing your squats, deadlifts, and things like that. Where it does play a role is when you're lifting lighter weights. So the idea back in the day, I'm pretty sure it's still being taught this way, that there's a hypertrophy rep range or a strength rep range, the 1 to 5, the 8 to 12, the 15 plus for endurance. But that's just, I guess you could say it's just not true. You can build muscle at any rep range, and it just depends on total volume and the relative effort of those sets. However, obviously, if you're doing, sets of 3 at like 85, 90%, you have to do like 7 to 10 sets. Yeah, it's probably going to take a pretty brutal toll on your body versus doing something like 3 sets of 10 at a lighter load. So if you're doing things like even like loads as light as like say 30% 1RM, or you're doing single joint exercises for 15 to 20 plus reps, triceps, biceps, isolation shoulders, etc., then typically you want to get closer to failure or to failure to get the most out of them in terms of muscle growth. So those ones you don't want to stop, say 3-4 reps of failure all the time. Maybe you do a week of that before increasing the intensity as you get used to it. You're 2 reps short of failure, then maybe you're 1 rep short of failure, then you're maybe at failure for maybe the final week of your cycle or something like that. Often with these small muscle groups anyway, you can get away with training 1 rep short of failure or 2 failure every single week for biceps, triceps, stuff like that. It just has no real effect on your recovery and your other lifts depending on how your split is set up. So that's something to definitely keep in mind as well when we're talking about training to failure. So typically you keep it to your, I guess, to your small muscle groups. But there are some interesting programs that I guess you could say old school ones, like super squats. I don't know if you've done a cycle of super squats, Colm. Before getting back to the podcast, I want to let you know that down in the description is a link to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground. And within that, you get access to all our training programs, online courses, and into our private Discord community, where all 3 of us are in there to help you with whatever it is with your training. Regarding the programs, we have Mona, who's done all of the weightlifting cycles. We have Colm, who's done the strongman off-season and strongman competition programs. Then we have all the hallmark Lift Big, Eat Big training programs, Pump Dragon, Flanks Method, and many more. And I've also added muscle building specialization programs within that, and are continuing to update and add training programs into our app. You also get access to Mona's Weightlifting Mastery online course, and you get to join these calls live in the audience where you can ask members only question and answers at the end of each episode. So if that sounds like you, go down in the description. There's a link there to the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, and that'll give you access to everything I just mentioned. The 20 rep squat breathing squat program. So by Randall Stresson. Yeah. Back in the day, and it's basically 1 set of 20 with your 10 rep max 3 times a week.
Yeah, I suppose I have done that, but that was back when my max would have been like 140 at 150 body weight. So it's easier to recover from. Yeah,
that I don't mind a set of 20 squats every now and then, but to do 10 rep max, so the goal is you get to 10 reps eventually, but you basically do every single rep as a single and taking 2 to 4 big breaths between every rep. So the set is stupidly long. And you just basically squatting heavy weights and adding weight every session 3 times a week, and then doing that for 6 weeks, which is like probably the most
overall goal.
Does that program?
Does that one get you to, do you retest your 1 rep max, or do you go for a 20 rep max?
It's literally just to gain size. It's like a size building program.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so just
there was one other thing I wanted to say on failure, and this is talking about, again, in the context of strength and strongman. It's a quote from Benedict Magnusson, and his view is it's better to not know how strong you are than know how weak you are. So this is basically his justification for why you don't want to go to failure. And personally, I do think this is early on in my career, my old powerlifting coaches had a similar view. If you're always holding a little bit back in the tank, as in 3 reps in the tank, 2 reps in the tank, these are still hard sessions, by the way. That's another thing I think people don't always understand, is that like a set of 3 reps in the tank squat or deadlift, like it's still pretty damn
Dude,
hard.
that's still so hard.
Yeah, it's not. People tend to like think it's easy. It's definitely not. But anyway, just to not to veer off to the side, it's like a confidence building tool basically. If you're just smashing your working sets of weight, again, like not talking about going to failure on those smaller muscle groups like James mentioned, but if you're smashing your weights on your squats and deadlifts every week and you're never really reaching your true limit, you're going to go into your competition knowing you've got a lot more in the tank. It is a far, far better feeling than going in knowing that you've missed like your last 2 sessions or something, you've failed a top weight. Because suddenly then mentally, even if there's a reason for you missing that weight, like let's say you were up all night with a baby or whatever, you missed your final deadlift single, even if you know that, it still has an effect on your mind, right? Like it's so much better to just lift within yourself and smash those weights opposed to going to failure. And I think to me that quote kind of sums up how I feel about it on those particular big exercises.
I almost feel like, Colm, what that quote is exactly relatable to weightlifting. How you were saying, like, I was just imagining myself, if I was working towards a competition, often like the week before, I would go until my first attempts in training. But if I had a training session, like for example, in Romania, I was dealing with injuries. I was tired all the time. I was like, my training was just like so much and mentally so draining that often just before the competition, I would miss my first bars. Like I would go into competition starting heavier than what I hit in training sessions. And to me, going into the competition, it did affect me mentally. I would go into the competition not feeling as confident as what I felt, knowing that I would hit my first bars super easy in training, like I've done with previous competitions. And those things, like you said now, mentally, like those things play a massive role. And I was also going to mention, like, for example, you do get also different athletes where with some athletes, and I'm not saying like right before competition, but if they are maybe in whatever training cycle you have them in, and you sometimes have athletes, you will make them go, like I will say, just work up to a heavy for the day. And you will often find that when you say that to the athletes will often go up until like in the 90s percentage wise, and they'll hit it comfortably and they will be like, okay, this is my heavy number. This is now where I call it quits. Because what I normally do is with my athletes, if I do say that to them and there's something I do want them to work heavy in, like let's just work up to a heavy power snatch for the day. Again, depending on the goal of what we want to achieve. You know, I do find that, or what I do put there for them is like, I do tell them, okay, if you do miss, because you do get the athlete who will like constantly want to go until they get the weight, I'll tell them, if you have 1 miss, then call it, you know, quit. Or if you have 2 misses, we'll call it quits. But then what I also do is, like I often say, if they miss their weight, to then reduce the weight and then end on a successful note. So we'll drop down up to like 80%, do like 1 or 2 reps, you know, do it easy, because how that works is like in, or what I've seen with athletes and even with myself, then you actually end the session not thinking of your misses, but you do feel a bit more confident that you made that 80% look super easy. But then, for example, something different now, like with certain training cycles, you will get some athletes where if I feel like going into competition, they always have this mental block of going for certain weights, or they have to hit a certain weight in training to know that they can hit it in competition. I'll often say to the athlete, okay, you know, we're going to have like a 1 rep max day. You know, it's like how many weeks before the competition, you know, this is your goal for today. We'll agree on it, because I want to always make sure that me and the athlete are on the same page with what we want to achieve. And then if they go and they miss the weight, and they missed it due to maybe being just mentally scared of going for the weight. But as the coach, I can see that it's very capable for this athlete to do this weight. And I will often say, okay, let's try again. I want you to feel the weight. Then at the end of the day, if, for example, you do get some days where you are not successful in your heavy lifts at all, like I said, then you drop down or whatever. But then I'll tell them, like, the good thing is, like, you felt this weight. So next training session or next time we go heavy again, I want you to go for that weight. And even if they do fail, that just giving them that reassurance of, like, now you felt the weight. Now next time, let's go for it. Because often what I do find is some athletes will miss weight just because it's more mental than actually them having or working to failure. For example, I think it's more they work to failure in their mind and not the physical body.
Does maxing out, is it different, Mona, in weightlifting? Because obviously, sometimes you obviously have big Fridays or big Saturdays within weightlifting each week. And the snatch and clean and jerk, even though you might be doing a max, it's not truly a max, I guess, strength lift to the body like a back squat or something would be, or a max deadlift, because it's lower percentages of those. Does that mean that you see lifters max out more often in weightlifting because of that? Because of those big Fridays and Saturdays?
I think it depends on the athlete. I think it depends on the coach. I think it depends on, the training program. Obviously, if they are on a volume cycle, for example, I wouldn't recommend, because now their body has just taken so much load. And often what you'll see is because they've worked and done so much load with obviously a lower percentage with volume training cycles, when you do make athletes go heavy, they tend to do silly mistakes, and that's when they injure themselves. So I have seen some athletes that do go heavy very frequently. And then, like I said, you do get some training programs or some coaches who will just be like, okay, if anything, we'll just, like Cole mentioned, keep some reps in the tank to make sure that the athlete, just work up to like a heavy weight and not necessarily to complete failure or to maxes. I'm not a fan of pushing my athletes to do heavy Fridays every week. When it comes to even competition blocks and stuff, they will go heavier. And again, depending on the athlete, will work up to like their first bars or a lot more in the 90% leading up to competitions. But I'm not a big fan of having 1 rep maxes week after week after week, just because I do see the athletes, being affected more mentally or their nervous system by it. And at the end of the day, you want the athlete to progress and not regress from over pushing them.
Well, that's a good point. While you're on the mic, Mona, do you want to maybe dive into the results from the previous week from the European Weightlifting Championships?
Definitely. So one of the big categories that we missed, and literally one of the big ones, so the super heavies of the Europeans that we were all excited to see. We were excited to see Lasha battling it out for that first place. He ended up getting that first place really easy. He ended up snatching 222 kilograms, clean and jerking 252. I think it was just short of like a 3 kg short of his world record. So I don't think he broke any world records at this European Championships. I also do know that I think it was the World Championships prior to Europeans at the end of last year that they did say when Lasha was actually battling for the gold medal against, I think it was the Armenian athlete, they did say that Lasha did come out of injuries. So I think that he's still on the recovery path. And even though, he's still ranked first going into the Olympics and being an athlete now who's been training for X amount of years, even if he does obviously get bonuses and things like that for breaking world records, etc., you also sometimes have to be clever and think that, okay, I'm playing the long game. He's playing to go to, obviously the Olympics 2024 and winning the Olympics. So I'm sure this Europeans was just, again, securing his spot, making sure he gets that gold medal. Like we talked about, I'm pretty sure that Lasha will get some benefits or some bonus money for winning that gold medal. But yeah, it ended up being a clean sweep for him, winning gold, no real battle. And also for the super heavy females, that was really, really interesting for me and something that was like just very inspiring is, so Emily Campbell, which I think everyone that knows, even the super heavy weightlifters, and especially in Europe, I automatically thought, Emily is my favorite. She will go out there, same like Lasha, make a clean sweep, win gold. She actually ended up missing her first 2 snatches, which obviously puts that pressure on an athlete to make that third attempt. If you don't, then you bomb. Then obviously that is one competition that's taken out of the books for her qualification for Olympics. But she ended up making her third snatch, winning the clean and jerks really easily. But the thing that was super inspiring, because I had a brief chat with Emily, is she said to me that this competition really meant a lot to her. And she didn't really go into much detail, but then she did post on Instagram talking about how she could almost not walk. She had a really, really bad injury. And I think she's had injuries this whole year. And they said that it was weeks before the competition that she could almost not even walk. And she went into this competition, won gold. And for me, again, such an inspiring athlete. For females, seeing how, these athletes can come from having an injury, coming into the competition, doing what they need to do in order to make sure they secure their spot, secure their medal. And it's just something like that. It's just, for me, it's amazing to see that an athlete can do that mentally wise and showing that grit, because she wanted that. So she went on to that platform and she did it.
She could just weigh in the rest of the competitions now, right? To recover and still qualify for the Olympics?
I think she could, because I'm not quite sure if she's lying first at the moment. And obviously what I understand with the qualification for this Olympics is the top 5 will have automatic qualifications. And the 5 other athletes who will qualify will, some of them will go from being chosen as a wild card. And I'm not quite sure how they're going to be choosing the other 5 athletes. But yeah, so if she is top 5 in the world, which I'm assuming she is, I'm pretty sure she would still go and try and make big totals at all of those competitions, just to make sure she still gets that automatic qualification to go to the Olympics and not rely on, if an athlete is, for example, lying 4th or even 5th, you still have that chance of potentially not making it if an athlete does come from behind and beat you, because it just takes one total for an athlete now to beat an athlete to go into this Olympics, where before it was the Roby points. So you kind of knew from about your 2nd, 3rd competition, who is going to Olympics or who is standing a chance. Where with this one, it's a little bit more tricky, and you have to obviously work a lot harder, seeing that it's 50% less athletes competing for weightlifting for this Olympics than in previous Olympic Games.
What's do you know what the next big weightlifting competition is?
So I actually had a look, because obviously now it was the European Championships, and my thoughts were obviously there's going to be more continental championships coming up. And in May, I saw that it is the Asian Championships coming up and the African Championships. So 2 big ones. There's some really strong African athletes, even countries like Egypt. For the men, Algeria has one of the top male athletes in the world. And like I said, Egypt is really strong. I mean, Egypt and Tunisia, especially with the females, are honestly like placing top at the moment with world rankings. So that's going to be super interesting to watch. I hope there's going to be live stream. Normally in African countries, there's not really live stream, or even if there is, it's not really that good. So I'm hoping that someone will stream it. And again, it's because of, what countries it's being hosted in, and obviously if they have Wi-Fi and those kind of things. So it's a bit different in the African countries than if you go to your first world countries, for example. And the Asian Championships, again, I don't know if that will be live streamed, but that will be insane. It's always insane. The Asian athletes are always like stupidly strong. So we will obviously see some really, really big numbers that will be lifted there. And then I actually had a look, because I didn't see the Oceania Championships coming up. And I think what I did see is that's only going to be closer to the end of the year, which is quite interesting that they would put it closer to the end of the year. And now all the continental championships were basically in April and May. So I don't know what the reason is behind that, or maybe if it will change or not change. But yeah, so continental championships coming up, and for the athletes who are basically representing their continent, this is also Olympic qualification events for them. So they will be going big, and we will be seeing big numbers on the board.
Yeah, I think the Oceanias, they usually put around the same time as like New Zealand nationals and stuff like that. So there's always a conflict between the two competitions.
Which is weird because
why do they do that?
Yeah, because it's like Oceania and like, but the thing is, you must also remember with Oceania, it's not just New Zealand. So it could be an Australian organizer. So why would they put it at the same time as New Zealand nationals if it's Australian? Say if the the Australians are organizing it.
Well, it's more so that New Zealand nationals don't change their dates around the Oceanias. Which is I don't know why. It's always something involved.
It's just weird for me that, like, because normally you'll see the continentals, because it's an Olympic qualification event, you'll see all the continental champs being always really close together so that they can all make those totals for the Olympics, kind of at the same time. Because I think there must be Commonwealth champs again this year. And often what I have seen is sometimes with Oceania championships, they can combine it with Commonwealth championships. So maybe that's something that they might look at doing. I'm not quite sure if or when Commonwealth champs will be. And I did also see that, which was quite interesting, is, or not interesting, but the All African Games, which is also a competition which is hosted or held every 4 years. That's also again this year. And it's so funny to think I competed in the last All African Games, which was 4 years ago in 2019. And it feels almost unreal that time has gone so quickly. I think with everything happening with, the pandemic and things like that, it just feels like we've kind of skipped time with all of these competitions coming up. And even the Olympics coming up now, it feels like the Olympics was the other day.
That sounds like Mona wants to make a comeback.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just lifted the other day. How can it be the Olympics again? I actually did have some questions where people asked me if I am going to make a comeback, actually on our Discord. And I've had people like send me DMs about it as well, because I'll talk about, working towards goals and things like that. And obviously, Colm, we've spoken about it. You planted that seed of maybe potentially going and doing some strongman competitions, which again, for me, not having to work now towards like any really big weightlifting goals. I do have that flexibility. And I think it is time to, make a change and work towards something
to buy a log.
new. Time to buy a log, James. So we need something else for our garage gym. So you'll be seeing me hopefully post a lot more strongman things in the future.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
Definitely want to see what you can put up overhead. I'm pretty sure it'll be something crazy.
And we've also got the Iron Mine sandbag in the garage as well. So that's there waiting for you.
Oh, sorry, Colm, yeah?
I was just going to say that real floppy one.
No, I fixed it.
But it's filled up now.
Yeah, you said
I fixed it.
You fixed it. But yeah, obviously I'll be sending my training videos to Colm so he can critique, because obviously doing, like, we looked at some of the log videos that he sent over. It's obviously a different technique to it. So yeah, having Colm have a look, world's strongest man coach, making sure that I do things properly. And then hopefully, like I said, put up some big numbers soon. Hey, Colm?
Yeah, should be good.
Yeah, if anyone's listening to this and likes to train strongman, then the Lift Big, Eat Big Underground, we have Colm's strongman programs in there, but you'll also be part of the Discord, so you can post your training videos in there, and Colm can give you some tips from a World's Strongest Man competitor on how to better your strongman events. But while we're on the topic of strongman, Colm, did you get your prediction right from the weekend?
No, I was off by one. With so Mitchell Hooper won it. So first Canadian winner. Tom Stoltman was second, so he was my prediction. And then Novikov I thought would be third, and he was third.
Almost
overall,
a trifecta.
like, what's that?
Almost a trifecta.
It was very close as well. Like Mitch did dominate, but the unfortunate thing, right? Like after I was telling you guys how I was having so much fun following it again, especially with Matt Ragg, who ended up 9th. So that was a great place for a first-time competitor at World's Strongest Man. And first New Zealander in the finals of the modern era, Alan Hellberg being the first like years ago. When it was in Christchurch, actually, funnily enough. Yeah, they had a cheese deadlift, which was pretty cool.
A cheese deadlift?
It was like a silver, like a partial deadlift, and it was filled with cheese, I think. The sides of it were very New Zealand Day. But yeah, I was having a lot of fun, like following along with the qualifiers, but unfortunately, World's Strongest Man had to go and be World's Strongest Man, and like I sent you guys the video of the dumbbell, but I don't want to like harp on it too much. But there was a few points that like really kind of annoyed me, and similar to like what we've spoken about in the past with weightlifting is, so I don't think it's any fault of the athletes, right? So, did you guys see that dumbbell I sent you?
Basically, no, I haven't. I'm gonna watch it right now though.
Monster dumbbell overhead, right? So you'd expect the finish to be something like this: eye contact with the judge, but it's out here and it gets the down signal. He wasn't the only one who got a call like that. Unfortunately, there was a lot of dodgy calls. I read, don't know if it's true or not, that because of the South African guy who I butchered his name last week, he unfortunately dropped one of the dumbbells on himself and got injured. So I heard that after that, they kind of wanted the judging to be a little bit more relaxed because these dumbbells were gigantic, right? They're like comically large. Not sure if it's true or not, if that's the particular reason they went a bit relaxed on rules. But as a fan, man, it's frustrating. There was a few things. So there was that. They had the shield carry where Pavlo like didn't quite make the line. And there's talk of whether the referee had told him like he had crossed so you had to carry a shield. You had to carry it as far as you can. And when you get to a side, you have to step your foot over the line. And so he didn't actually make it over the line. But there was talk of whether the judge told him he was or not. I think it's come out now that the judge said, no, you're not over the line, but he continued back. And then there's another issue with Brian Shaw doing the finger fingers. And the finger fingers are elevated off the floor by these little blocks. So I remember them there as well. But as you pick up the finger, sometimes the blocks fall. And on his final finger, he gets to the 5th. You can see in certain angles that have probably been taken down by IMG by now. But he starts flipping it, and you can see them fall, and like they kind of I'm assuming he trips on one of them a little bit, and he fails that final finger. Not sure whether it would have made a difference or not. But then there was the judging of the dumbbell as well, and just the combination. Oh, and then see there's another thing as well, the bus pull. So I think there was about 5 guys, right, all within like half a second of each other on the bus pull. And I think there was even an exact tie, which if you're pulling a bus, right, and to have all these guys half a second in between each other, it's just pretty suspect. And they time it just on a stopwatch. But what I've heard is that they time it on the stopwatch and then they go back on the high frame cameras and they go frame by frame and get an exact time. Don't know if that's just a cover story or if it's true.
Colm, I wanted to say, what if the stopwatch fail? What would then happen?
I imagine they'll just look at the camera. But yeah, it's frustrating as a fan, like, because there's so many, like, timing lights are so easy to use and set up.
Yeah.
They could do that sort of thing. But to have it just, again, I don't think it's a fault of the athletes at all. It's just frustrating as a fan. And it's frustrating to know how much effort these guys all put into their training. And then I'm not saying any of these things would necessarily make a difference on the outcome, but I'm saying it shouldn't exist as an argument in the first place. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just find it frustrating. Kind of like with the judging and weightlifting, right? It shouldn't. When they were was it Matty Rogers? Who did they give the no lift for shoulder movement? It's like
for the shoulder movement was Sarah Davies, and for Matty Rogers it was the judges gave her a down signal, but then they ended up turning her
and then they
their
took it. Yeah.
then they took it away.
So it's just an example of like, it just sucks for the athletes, eh? And it sucks for the fans. It really shouldn't be an issue. Every year they do, like, say things are getting better, and I don't know. At this point, I find it quite frustrating. I don't necessarily think it would change the results at all, but things like say that thing with the fingers, right? I remember doing it, and I do remember those little blocks, and having to think like, okay, I'll have to make sure I step my foot in the right place. But I don't know. It just feels to me like there's things that they could do to make it run more efficiently. So when I was there, the warm ups were horrendous. Like we just had a bar up to like 140. You do a bit of a warm up, go out, pull on like a different setup of like 350, and it was pretty bad. But I think now they've gotten quite a bit better at that, so that's good. So there are some positives. I don't want to be too negative, but yeah, and like it's just frustrating as a fan, like just seeing that these things are even an issue at this stage and how advanced it is. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I actually ended up basically just rage quitting following it, and then I went along and watched on I think the channel is called Weightlifting House. I was just watching all the European European weightlifting, because the thing for, like, I've been given a dodgy dumbbell down call as well. I remember that, and I just felt bad as well because I knew I didn't get the lift. But see, what happens now is that's going to go out on TV. Like World's Strongest Man are the ones who posted. You just watched that video that I sent to you. So World's Strongest Man themselves posted that. So that's probably like, it might become the new standard now. Because you've got, like, let's say 2 million people view it over Christmas. A portion of them go get into strongman. They're all seeing this. They see the previous year. It's probably, the standards are going to keep getting watered down. Already it's kind of happened with the log. Like you can
lean back, right?
Back so much. Yeah, you can lean back and still get the down signal.
It's almost like they only look for elbow lookout.
Yeah, well, it's not. It should still be like feet in line, and you're meant to make contact with the judges and stuff. But it does seem to be how heavy or how close you are to a record, and how much they want to be able to promote that. Because this is a big example, right? So the world, it's happened a couple different times, but the axle world record, right? So clean and press overhead with the axle and with the log, you get 3 attempts. You've got a minute for each attempt. I forget which one it was, whether it was the axle or the log, but there's a guy called LBEB, ridiculously strong overhead presser. He missed his attempt. He missed his final attempt, right? So that's it. That's his chance gone. But the promoter asked the crowd if they wanted to give him another shot. They gave him another shot, and he got it. So that's, again, it's about entertainment in a TV show, right? But imagine if that happened at the Olympics or something.
Weightlifting,
I think you'll have a lot of angry weightlifters.
But
funny, did it affect would stuff like that cause bad sportsmanship and things like that? Because now an athlete got given another chance, and say if there's someone who maybe was going for first or second place and missed something, and is like, well, if I was given a 4th attempt, then I would have gotten it, and my placings would have been higher.
Yeah, at this particular one, I don't think anyone else was really in the running. I forget if it was log or deadlift, but I think he was kind of the last guy left from the previous attempt, so no one else was still in there with him. But yeah, they wanted a record. They wanted to be able to promote it as a record because it brings more eyes into the sport. But yeah, so basically it waters down the sport, but at the same time it gets more eyes on the sport. It's and at the end of the day, yeah, strongman is definitely, you have to remind yourself, well, I have to remind myself, it is entertainment and a TV show first, and then it's a sport second. So
But I feel almost like you taught us something, because I don't know about if James knew it like that, but for me, I would have never, I just thought it was literally like legit. These athletes train, it's something that's like, this is the competition rules. There's no bending it. There's no, trying to change things for camera's sake, or making sure that, angles are good, or making sure that, they do it at a specific time. So yeah, that was something that I never knew, and kind of made me a little sad as well, because I'm a big World's Strongest Man follower, or especially used to be in the past. But now I'm like, man, I'll be looking at it and thinking now, are they just doing a certain thing now for show, or is it legit?
Yeah, like ultimately it is all for show, but the athletes, I would definitely say, are very much all legit, as in they're ridiculously strong. It's not like they're fake weights or anything like that. Although sometimes the weights do get mislabeled. But yeah, I still don't think it's necessarily a fault of the athletes. The athletes are just going to follow the judging rules. And World's Strongest Man is not the only one to have that relaxed judging. So Giants Live, even Rogue had a few dodgy calls. But yeah, it just seems to be getting a bit more relaxed over time, if you know what I mean. And yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. But the other issue, so suits are allowed in deadlift. This is something I could see being an issue in the future, is because suits help you so much off the floor. I could also kind of see guys getting to a point where they can get a down signal from the judge without fully being locked out. Because if you can fire it up off the floor, kind of do a little bit of a hitch, and you could almost stand a little bit soft knees, a little bit soft hips, and get the down signal from the judge, depending on how you do it. I could see that becoming an issue in the future as well, which I think they're actually aware of and have tried to cut back a little bit. But
is that new? Suits for the deadlift and the strongman? Or is that old?
It's always been allowed. So as long as I've been into it, it's been allowed. But back when I first started, back in 2011, no one really used them, because no one really liked them. And when guys did use them, say I was competing with Big Z and Radzikowski and these guys, they just put their suit on before they did anything. So their suits were so loose, they just chucked it on. They chucked all their equipment on, and then they went out and warmed up. So they're they can bend over and lift 60 kgs with a suit on. So it's almost like a bit of extra support. Maybe it gives you a little bit of weight, but now you'll see them they've got the custom made suits to their dimensions, the Velcro straps, so you can adjust it, have it as tight as possible. And you have to have a guy helping you. There's no, they're so tight, you're making full use of it. So it's definitely, back in the day, although they were allowed, it wasn't really the same level of use. And Brian Shaw was this was the first time he ever wore a deadlift suit, I'm pretty sure. Don't think he's ever worn one before this year. He would wear a squat suit with the straps down, but yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen him wear a deadlift suit before. Which, in hindsight, I do think he was he's done. So he retired, right? This was his final World's Strongest Man. Ridiculously strong. I do feel like he could have probably won that 5th title in another, a few years ago, before he hurt his hammy. But that deadlift, I think, if he had, I'm not sure why he didn't wear a deadlift suit. I think he just didn't really like them. Because I remember him trying to get them banned for the World Deadlift Champs. But yeah, I actually asked the organizer as well when I was over there, because I'm not a fan of suits. It's just a pain to train in. And he said they'll probably never get rid of them, just because it lets guys lift a bigger number. Bigger number looks better on TV, so it is what it is.
It comes back to the TV then, always. But are there any upcoming... is there any competitions coming up that strongman fans can look forward to? Because there's few and far between, right, through the year, that at least televised or streamed.
The Rogue, I'm pretty sure hasn't been this year yet, has it?
No, it hasn't.
I know we were confused about that last week. So the Rogue will be. They've had.
I was going to say it felt like it was this year, but I think it might have been
It
It's
was last
October.
year, eh?
Yeah.
27 to 29 October.
Okay. Because I remember
So
watching
that-
it, and again, time has gone so quickly. It's insane.
That will kind of be the other. So now there's kind of those three big ones. The other ones are gone under. There used to be a big one in Dubai, but Arnold Classic Ohio, World's Strongest Man, and then the Rogue Invitational. So, like in terms of guys bringing their A games, it'll probably be the Rogue Invitational next. So October or whatever it was you said.
Yep.
But
And it's in
there'll
Austin,
be
Texas
heaps
too.
of. Is it?
Yep.
Oh,
You better
that'll
come
be
by.
cool. You're gonna go down and watch.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. It's not too far, it's just up in Round Rock. But you're gonna have to fly over. You're gonna have to enter. They got strongmen and
That's,
rogue record breakers.
Invite only. I definitely won't get. I'm not in
Well,
shape to get invited.
Mona knows the organizer of the rogue record
yeah.
breakers. Hey,
Try to pay my.
Mona, you
pay
could
my
set up that. You could set up that
must
email.
I go to Jan Todd?
Yeah.
Be like, hey.
Set up that email.
I'll get training.
Well,
Video training, and we'll see.
I do want, it would be awesome if Colm does come down and you do get to meet her, because I still have to go and sit down and have a coffee with her and catch up, and take you to, the Stark Center.
Oh yeah, Stark Center's legit. Like full strength sports history.
Yeah.
Museum.
If you are a strength athlete, this is something that will blow your mind, and you will want to take any and every strength athlete that you know to that place. It's so amazing.
Who does she run that one? Like, is it like a strength museum?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how. I think it's her and her husband that started it back in the day, because if you go and do some research on like Jan Todd and her husband Terry Todd, and obviously he passed away like a few years ago, or I can't remember when, but they were basically the start of like strength sports and things like that, I think, in the US. And whenever they started the Rogue Invitational and stuff like that, and I think they were the ones who either set up the Stark Center or were definitely the inspiration behind it, because I think if you go in there, there's even stuff of her. Hey, Liv, I think there's things of her in there.
I can't remember. It was a while.
Yeah,
we went 6 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to go again. I think we need to update, our minds and, see what's new there and stuff. And then we can actually talk about it on here.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I know. They were pretty much responsible for setting up the Arnold, in terms of the strongman like side of it. Like they are like very well known in the strongman world.
Yeah, and I think she actually also put strength sports for females on the map as well.
Yeah.
So really, she is one of those people who is so amazing and so inspirational. Yeah, I'm really lucky to have gotten to meet her. And yeah, if you come down, Colin, or not if, when, we should all, we should take you, and James also must meet her. Yeah.
That sounds cool.
No.
I have a couple random weightlifting questions.
Go.
Was Lasher injured? To me, it looked like he walked. Like, did he go 6 from 6?
I'm actually not sure if he got 6 for 6.
Because when he was walking off, I felt like he was walking off a bit gingerly. Like, to me, it looked, as someone who's had knee injuries in the past, it looked familiar to me. So I know he was off because of both of his knees, eh?
Yeah. I was going to say, at Wills, that was one of the things that they said. I think I mentioned it in the last podcast where I said, he's always been going to competitions and making a clean sweep, but he actually had that battle with I think it was the Armenian athlete. Yeah. And they were mentioning, Weightlifting House were actually talking about it. They were mentioning that they were saying that he did come from injury. So I'm assuming that, like I said, these athletes who has trained for X amount of years, like these injuries don't just go away. Because it's not like he can take 6 months off and go for a surgery. He'll probably do those things once he retires or maybe after the Olympics. And I'm not quite sure how long he will still be lifting, but I'm also assuming that he's one of those athletes who will retire at the top. I think he probably doesn't have maybe like I won't say he has even like 10 years in him left. But injury wise, I think it's probably the old injuries that's just still there. And, you know, him just going out and making sure he's winning and securing his spots and stuff like that.
Yeah. What I reckon is so cool about weightlifting, like watching, I just watched a bunch of those weightlifting house videos, is how you have those little battles between people in the training hall, like the week of the comp, doing their different variations. Like, I feel like you could monetize that in a way and live stream their some of their sessions. Like, but I wondered how often does that actually happen? And like if it's just purely coincidence or not. So the one I'm talking about is like this might have actually been from Worlds, but like Lasher was warming. He was doing a training session throughout the week. He was doing like no foot movement snatch, working up to X amount of weight, but he seemed to go heavier because that other dude, I forget his name, sorry, but the guy who was kind of pushing him for a bit there when he was injured.
Yeah,
your mic's off.
Man, your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry. Because Mia was crying. Yeah. I was saying, I think it's the Armenian athlete, right?
Yeah. But so it seemed like he went heavier because that guy snatched a certain amount. And that's the way this video kind of made it out. It was almost like they're battling. But is that an actual thing, or was it just like, have you ever had that where you're training in the weightlifting hall and you've got a competitor there, you know that you're training against them, you're competing against them on the weekend? Like, do you take account of what they do? Do you stick to yourself?
So I'm an athlete who will stick to my program, because I know if I had to do something like that and get injured, my coach would absolutely kill me. But I do know there are some athletes, and one other athlete that came to mind now is Meso from Qatar. And Meso often has these little battles and things. They'll do like muscle snatches up to like maxes and things like that. Also like, the week before the competition, I've seen that as well. And I can't remember who Meso was doing it with. Or they'll do like, max press or max push press and things like that. So I'm assuming that it's things that they'll do, which they know for a fact won't affect their, their lifting on the day. And again, these little battles, I'm pretty sure it does, it's an ego thing. So these athletes who, do it, it's like, I'm just trying to show that I'm still the strongest athlete. I'm the strongest on the platform. I'm also the strongest given any other day doing any exercise. But you won't see this with like just the normal athlete. This is literally, I think if there's also cameras on them, so things like All Things Gym and Hook Grip and Weightlifting House, if they are around, because often what they will do is, because you can't just go to the back and video these athletes, for example, you have to have permission. You have to have a pass, a media pass, permission to go to the back and stuff like that. And you'll find that Weightlifting House, All Things Gym, those kind of people, they will find out when the athletes have their heavy sessions. And you'll often see a few of the countries who are also having their heavy sessions, having it like on the same day, and they'll end up documenting it. So they'll end up making YouTube videos from this. So you won't see them go and battle it out and do like max something if there's not cameras on them.
Oh yeah. No, it's interesting. I find it really interesting because you would never get that in powerlifting. You'd never get that in strongman, just because the nature of the sport is so, just max force output. It's so slow. If you tried to do like even a squat variation the week of, it's probably going to be pretty detrimental. But with weightlifting, it was just cool seeing Lasher do this other variation, like no foot movement snatch.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me in a way of, say, like pre-UFC guys who aren't absolutely destroyed from cutting weight, but you'll see them doing their different media workouts, except it's better than that because they're actually lifting and then they're competing in lifting, whereas anyone can kind of look cool hitting the pads and whatnot. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool thing. I would, if I keep watching and become more and more of a fan, I could just imagine trying to watch all that stuff
I was going to say, are you going to start weightlifting
to bet on it?
Yeah, I imagine that. I was actually going to say, as like you get these athletes who's got these huge social media following, like people like Lasha and like Meso and, you know, like some of the others. And these people will end up doing these things. And like you said now, because they have such a big following, you will see thousands of athletes, you know, just your general gym goers that, you know, they will go and try these things. And, you know, the weightlifting athlete who maybe they compete, but they're not like super serious and they're not elite. They will end up doing it. But those are the people who end up, you know, following the Lashas and the Mesos and those kind of people. And it's exciting and it's entertaining and it's nice seeing these athletes, you know, not always taking everything seriously, although there is a time and place, because if an athlete like that had to do something and did get injured, you know, meaning there goes their, because it's their bread and butter, you know, there goes their careers, there goes their, you know, sponsorships and those kind of things. There goes their Olympic gold. So athletes will normally do it, like you said, if it's something that is not too detrimental. If, like you said, if someone had to go and do a different squat variation for a powerlifting competition the week of and go max and do something silly like that, it will be pretty detrimental for your sport.
Well, it reminds me of the golden era of lifting YouTube back in the day, where you had like hook grip and all things gym training hall videos, like hour-long training hall videos. You had like Ilya Ilin, like full hour-long training session, just like unedited. And you just watch those lifts. Like that was the golden era of lifting YouTube. You could just watch people train for an hour and not have like random, you know, cinematography, fitness people doing random shit.
Yeah. Now you'll almost just find... Oh, sorry. Sorry, Colin?
I was going to say, honestly, I missed that period of before bloody like clickbait titles and before clickbait thumbnails and just raw training footage. I just love raw training footage.
Yeah, you could watch the Russian training halls, and then you had the old Polish training videos. Yeah, then obviously the individual athletes, you could just watch literally an hour of Ilya Ilin doing snatches. And just like watching that is crazy. And then, yeah, obviously the old hook grip and all things gym videos, you can still find those, I think. I'm pretty sure they must still be out from like almost 8 years ago now, like 2015, 2014, even back then, I think even 2013. They had a lot of those those full videos of countries. Yeah, those were epic. But
I think people have just taken advantage now of just posting things on Instagram and TikTok. So they've become Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, TikTok and Instagram lifters.
All those Gen Zers.
Yeah. I did actually want to mention, and I know obviously like our podcast is coming close to an end, but there was that athlete, and I actually can't remember now who it was. And maybe you'll know, James. It's the athlete who went and broke the world record in training the other day that they said had the wrong weights.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Was it a female?
A male athlete. So I'm not quite sure if...
Oh, you're talking about the American dude in training that said he broke a world record in his gym, but he's using like 2.5 kilo red plates or something like that. Well,
yeah,
it's
so
definitely
people were giving him flack because he posted he broke this world record and things like that, and people were like, those aren't real 25s in there. It's
Was he doing this just for attention or honest mistake?
Probably.
No, attention.
No, it is an honest mistake.
Yeah. No, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. No, but that brings us to the end of this show. Again, the Lift Big Epic Underground, that'll be in the description. You get access to all the training programs, all the weightlifting programs by Mona, and the strongman programs by Com. There's also all your general strength and building muscle programs in there, the private Discord, the weightlifting course, and you can join these live to ask us any questions during this show. But we will see you next week.